Hello everyone, my name is Crimson, and welcome back to another Chat and Craft. I'm just wanting to bring up some subjects to talk about for a little bit as I have some Minecraft gameplay in the background. Still working on that platform. Should be a nice little video for you, but I was thinking about something I brought up the other day, and I wanted to go ahead and talk about it more because it's been kind of on my mind for a long time now. And that's the current state of Marvel and DC. Now, before I go into there, I do want to apologize if I had accidentally said something in the past about the character from Paper Mario Thousand Year Door, Vivian. I had actually been under the wrong impression because of an old MatPat video from 10 years ago, and let's just be honest, the Rule 34 community. So I had thought that Vivian actually was always transgendered. Turns out they are a cross-dresser. Did not know that, but it is good to have that distinction and know the difference. Because it's good to support the character in the way that they were meant to be supported by the people that actually made the character and not let, people change them. Which actually ties into the problem with Marvel and DC and how people have gone in that did not make the character and do not respect the original wishes of the creators and start changing things. So one of the big problems that we see with Marvel and DC, and it didn't used to be a problem with DC, but it started with Marvel, as far as I'm aware, started with Marvel, is that they would go in and start changing characters that had a long-running histories of being X, Y, or Z so that they could fit a new agenda or a new quota. A lot of people call this basically making fan fiction into canon. And as a fanfiction author myself, I kind of totally agree. See, I love fanfiction because that's a place where you get to tell all the wild, weird, crazy stories. But I also value fanfiction as being a separate reality from the canon. We kind of need the canon to be stabilized and somewhat normal so that we have something to make fanfiction of. If you don't have something to make fanfiction of, then you're not going to be making fanfiction forever. You're going to start making original properties, which probably is not the worst thing. It's a lot harder for newer creators to get started with making original properties as opposed to working with fanfiction. So there's a lot of value to fanfiction existing, especially as a transitionatory state to help authors learn how to write and get feedback early before they start making their own things and do some really big, weird, accidental, bad storytelling. And so we are in a weird place where the quality of stories from both Marvel and DC have plummeted in the last 5 to 10 years, but it's been going on longer than that from what I understand. It turns out it's been going on for a very long time. And the worst problem is that they probably could have fixed this without actually having any problems with the actual hardcore fans. See, they did the same thing that Games Workshop kind of did, which is they looked at their hardcore fans, the people who would buy, every single variant cover of every single new issue of their favorite comic, even if they didn't like that individual issue and thought, well, maybe Iron Man going out for ice cream this week is not the most exciting adventure, but I have to have all 3 variant covers. I just have to. Well, they took those fans and said, if you're not going to support our current agenda in, politics, we don't need your money. And those fans have been left, basically homeless. Except it has given rise to the new modern comics, modern indie comics that are coming out, which is pretty cool. Stuff like Big Man Comics, whatever Yellow Flash's comic is. I think it's called Jawbreakers. Stuff stuff like that has become increasingly more popular because of the fact that the woke have destroyed modern comics. And now let's be entirely fair here. It's not just the woke's fault. There is a problem within the higher echelons of Marvel and DC and a lot of these companies that I don't think that the companies themselves are actually quote unquote woke. I think they just wanted to get that grant money. And this was a good excuse to get free money, basically, without having to placate fans. Of course, the problem with money is it doesn't actually grow on trees. It's not actually infinite. So when it runs out, and you have to go back to your original fans who would buy all the covers, they may not be there anymore. And although I do want to support stuff like the new Ultimate Spider-Man coming out, which is, by the way, a really bad name. We now have 3 Ultimate Spider-Mans in it. They should have just use a different name. Just call it Family Man Spider-Man or something. But although I want to support it, I'm hesitant to because I don't know where it's going to go. There are predictions that say that, give it like 12 issues, it's going to start getting weird. But we'll see. But as much as I want to support it, I am going to take a break and just wait for a little bit before I do. But hopefully that gives a sign to Marvel that, hey, the classic comic book fans will come back if you give us what we want. If you stop spitting on our face. And there's just so much to talk about in this, and people have spent literally dozens of hours going over this, but to put it simply, there's a way that this could have worked without pissing off any fans and still being okay. Basically, all they really had to do was create an alternate universe for the woke characters and call it, I don't know, Marvel Woke, and or Marvel Awakening, or something stupid, right? And the people that want that stuff, they'd go and buy it. Granted, let's be honest, as much as they like to argue that they want this, there's not a lot of evidence that there's enough people to actually make that kind of thing work, monetarily speaking. Which, I don't know, it's both good and bad. It means there's not really a market for it, but it also means that there's not a market for it. But if they had just made a separate universe for all the woke stuff, then what I think you would have seen is that a lot of the hardcore fans would have still had their home to go back to. And they'd probably be willing to try out the new stuff a little bit, see where female Thor goes, see where Miss Captain Marvel goes, see where that all goes. But instead of that, they do what the woke does, and they want to occupy and take over someone else's space instead of having their own, and then they leave. Now, granted, the woke people are still technically working at Marvel and DC. They haven't really disappeared, but they also haven't, paid them enough money to keep this stuff going. So, yeah, there's problems. And, just like with the issue with changing Vivian from Mario the Thousand Year Door to fit your current agenda and themes instead of respecting who they used to be and really are, they did stuff that, even I raised an eyebrow and I'm like, this is not right. I can see what they're trying to say, but I don't agree with what they're doing. Like, making Iceman gay. Like, yeah, you could totally make the argument that it's possible, but that's more of a fan fiction thing. Like, that's something I would read in a fan fiction and enjoy. I don't want that in my main comic. That is kind of the problem, though, is they put that in the main comic, which means they ruined canon, which means they kind of ruined a character for a lot of people that really liked him. And I remember that this was one of my first starting to wake up calls to what the hell was really going on. Was watching. I don't even remember what the channels were. Comic Storian or something. Comic Universe. Comic Explained. I think all those guys are at least slightly woke, if not completely woke. And one of them had gone over the story supporting it. And I'm sitting there the whole time thinking, like, wait a minute. Instead of making a new X-Men that was actually gay, they took a character that wasn't gay, made him gay, and then pissed off all the fans that loved, Iceman. Why? Why did they do that? Why don't they just make their own things? And I mean, by now we know it's not about making their own things and having people actually respect the value of the character and the idea and the identity. It's about making a message and taking territory, which is the stupidest thing. However, I did have to stop before I made this video. I had to stop and think really hard. Was there any situation where a unique, original character that was a superhero that was also gay actually worked? And I'll admit, it took me a long time to actually figure this out. Mostly I wasn't doing research. I could have done Google search and looked it up and probably found a lot more, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to use my own brain and memories and be like, okay, what characters are there? The reason it was so hard is because instead of the characters, being based on being gay, which would make them stand out more, right? Like, you could look at Miss Captain Marvel and be like, yes, she is gay. Or look at Iceman and go, he is now gay. And that's kind of all their identity revolves around. The ones that actually work are older examples, and they work because their identity is not based on, we're the gay one. Which also means it was a little hard for me to kind of remember what characters were what. But I kind of came down to a couple of good ones. So the first one is actually the main character from Cardcaptor Sakura, who is not explicitly a Yuri character, but she is an implicit Yuri character, meaning there is a good chance that her and her best friend are, not actually just friends. They're a little bit more than that. And I don't mind implicit Yuri. That's something that the West just does not understand, is that implicit Yuri is a thing. It's kind of fun. Granted, I do prefer explicit Yuri, which is where you definitely know that they're gay. And this is the second one. Sailor Moon. There are two sailors that are in the team that are just gay for each other. America changed them to make them into quote-unquote cousins, which is hilarious. They might actually have been cousins canonically anyway, because Japan doesn't consider cousins as incest, but that's another story and another, ball of yarn to have fun playing with later. Get all tangled up in the Japanese incest. Haha. But seriously speaking, those were the two that came to mind. And the Sailor Moon characters are the most explicit example. They're attractive. They're feminine as hell. They are sexually active, which makes them actually pretty damn funny. And their identities are not based on just being gay. Their identities are based on their personality, their story, their role within the group, and the challenges that they tackle in a day-to-day life. And that's much better than what we usually see. I don't think there's a single character in Sailor Moon that stops and says, you can't be gay because of the straight white patriarchy says not to. I'm pretty sure half the villains are actually homosexual in Sailor Moon. Which is another ball of yarn to get into, but I don't think Sailor Moon ever stops and says that being gay is bad. Not even once. And you compare that to the West, where it's they try to paint these stories of being attacked and stuff, and when you ask the actual gay community what they want in a story, that's not it. They just want gay people being people. They just so happen to be gay. which is something that I feel like the woke people that write these stories don't understand. And maybe it boils down to the fact that their target audience is not actually the gay community. They're not trying to write stories for gay people. They're trying to write stories for their best friends. They're writing stories for the other people they work with in office. They're not writing stories for the audience at large or even have a target demographic in mind. And for a business trying to sell something, that is really weird to say. Now, I am an artist and I don't have a target demographic that I think about when I make stuff, but I also don't charge people money. And I also don't go on tirades saying, how dare you not buy my thing? I just make weird shit. And if people like it, that's cool. If they don't, that's also cool. It's literally just my way of surviving. And some people like that. And that's awesome. And that kind of leaves us in this weird place where if the comic books are not actually made for anyone, then they're not going to make money, which means they'll eventually disappear. And I just don't understand why this has become so prevalent, and it's just a nightmare. It won't be able to last because it doesn't make money, and unfortunately the world does revolve around money. It's not like these guys are making webcomics in their free time and working at a gas station, right? Like, if they were, that could go on indefinitely. And that's also kind of how you found some of the best weird stuff in the past, was through indie creators. There's a lot of old webcomics that I used to love that were like that. And so we look at the absolute mess that has become the comic book industry. We look at the disaster that has become superheroes and movies, and it's just kind of disheartening because for a little while, Marvel was really good and popular, although people that had followed the comics had seen this coming a mile away. In all honesty, I really like the old version of Miss Marvel because she was a three-dimensional character. She wasn't very strong. She was very, self-conscious about being popular. She was worried that she'd never be, good at what she does or people would acknowledge her, and because the world really didn't. And then there were some situations where the world didn't acknowledge her when she needed it most, and she actually had a good, reason and right to tell off the Avengers for being assholes. Also, she had a absolutely sexy costume. Downright just, I don't even know if there's words to describe it. Those thick thighs, the big bosom. She was hot. And then you look at, compare that to the modern version where she stole the name of the person that died of cancer, by the way. And she looks kind of like a dude, and it's like, who the hell is that? That's not Miss Marvel. That's not Miss Captain Marvel. That's a nightmare. What is that thing? And it's tragic. And even the remade Miss Marvel comics were good in the first volume. I read that and enjoyed it. It wasn't really my thing, but I did enjoy it. It was still pretty good. But yeah, we're in a really weird place with the comic book industry, with superheroes, with all of that. And it does increase my interest in making my own superhero story at some point. And I could probably do it without too much issue, but it's just not something I've really wanted to put a lot of focus into, because even I'm kind of burnt out on the concepts, and I'm the weirdo who makes stuff that nobody wants. So, how bad is it if I'm burnt out? Granted, if someone told me that they had a silly Golden Age or Bronze Age inspired comic that was like The Tick, but it was also, still open-minded and did not, shit on people they don't agree with, I would buy that in a heartbeat. I may not actually read it for a while, but I would buy it in a heartbeat because I know that we kind of need to fix the superhero space. It's been too damaged over time. And although I love, anime, My Hero Academia got a little too dark, which ruined the themes of being a Golden Age inspired comic. And although I think One Punch Man is amazing, I'm waiting for that to catch up to the manga. That's my only thing with it. I think the best piece of superhero media to really come out in a long time that was original and standalone probably was Megamind. It was a little bit of a take on the Superman idea, but what I think it really did is it really showed that a superhero is defined by their actions and morals, not just by their superpower and not even just by the fancy words they say, but like what they actually do. And so Megamind was pretty good. I don't know if we ever need a sequel to it because I don't think that it would ever work, but I like Megamind. And I think that if they made a new universe that was inspired by the Megamind universe, that'd be pretty cool. But I don't trust them to make it perfect nowadays. But we'll see. I believe that's a DreamWorks film, and that's still better than anything Pixar can come up with, so, maybe if they did it, it would be good. We'd only have to wait and see if it happened. But that's kind of just been all I wanted to talk about today. So, wherever you are, whoever you are, I hope you have a wonderful day, and adios.